Some unique things when it comes to backing up and restoring Hyper-V that we want to be aware of. You can back up the virtual machine from the host itself. That's an option. You can also back up the virtual machine's virtual hard drives. And you can back up inside the VM, which simply means that you install the Windows backup feature inside the virtual machine, and you log into the virtual machine and you configure your Windows server backup. Now, the end result is going to be the same for any of these, but some reasons you may like to back up from the host. One reason is it's centralized. If my host has 20 virtual machines, if I back up inside the VM, you have to go to your 20 virtual machines, install the backup feature on the 20 virtual machines, then configure each one independent of the others. If I do this from the host, I can just have one configuration that I use to manage the backup of all the virtual machines. Whichever one you choose, if the virtual machine were to fail, you could restore, whether that's directly from the backup at the host level or if it's from the backup you created inside the virtual machine. So you really get the same capabilities, just different ways to possibly go about it. You can also perform an online backup. Online backups have no downtime if you meet these conditions. The VM has to have integration services installed. That is a non-issue because integration services are installed in Hyper-V by default. So all your VMs will have integration services running. All integration services do is extend full capability from the host to the virtual machine. For example, if you do not have integration services installed, your mouse, the cursor, will get trapped inside the virtual machine. So if you were to pull up a VM and log into it, when you click with the mouse, or the cursor, I should say, is stuck inside the virtual machine until you use some key break sequence to actually release it from the virtual machine. With integration services installed, that just never happens. You click inside your virtual machine, then you click back to the host. Without integration services installed, you could not change the resolution of a virtual machine. Now, again, that's a non-issue with a Hyper-V virtual machine because they're installed by default. That was not always the case in Hyper-V, but since 2012, all Hyper-V servers have automatically enabled these integration services. Each disk that your VM uses must use the NTFS file system. No FAT, no refs, and they have to be basic disks. I know earlier we talked about basic disks and dynamic disks, and dynamic disks were associated with RAID, where if I wanted to mirror drives, they had to be converted to be a dynamic disk. Can't do that if we want this online backup. So basic disks with an NTFS file system format. And you also have to use volume shadow copy services. That's what this VSS stands for, volume shadow copy services. Has to be enabled on all volumes within the virtual machine. Now, no one really calls this VSS. It's normally called shadow copies. What shadow copies do is allow you to specify a drive, and it will take a copy, basically like a snapshot of data on a drive at a specific time. So let's say I have a shadow copy created at 10 a.m. At 10:30, a user calls and says 5 minutes ago they were editing a file and they click save, but the changes they saved to the file they should not have saved, and they simply want to revert back to the version before. Well, if I had a shadow copy that was created at 10 o'clock, I could simply go back to that file. I could right click and go through this previous versions, and I could revert back to the copy of that file at 10 a.m. So you can take shadow copies multiple times a day. Just a quick and easy way to revert back to a previous copy of a file. But you have to have shadow copies enabled on your volume for that capability to exist. Well, the online backup requires that to be enabled on all the volumes within the virtual machine. And by default, this is actually disabled. So it is the one change you would likely have to make, because integration services enabled by default. When you install a virtual machine, it uses an NTFS file system by default, and it is a basic disk by default. So nothing you do for either of those. But we will have to enable the VSS because that's not done for us.